everybody. Welcome. We are in the middle of a study called A Man After God's Own Heart, the life of David in the Bible. And we're in 1 Samuel chapter number 27 today. This is part 13 of this study. We saw yesterday in part 12, chapter 26 of 1 Samuel, that Saul left David alone. They had their second confrontation where David could have killed Saul, but instead chose to leave him alive because he's not going to lift his hand up against God's anointed. Well, that was a magnificent David in chapter number 26. And unfortunately, I've got to give you the bad news that in chapter 27, David is no longer magnificent. Now, I'm not going to berate him or put him down for this. He's going through incredible discouragement, and we're going to see the destructiveness of discouragement in the life of a Christian. So if you can follow along, go to 1 Samuel 27, and we'll pick it up in verse number 1. Very short chapter here, but there's a lot to unpack. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. So let's stop there. First off, David doesn't say this to God. He doesn't say it to anyone else, seemingly, but he's saying it to himself. And the words that we speak to ourselves matter greatly. We have to be very, very cautious how we talk to ourselves. Also, our heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. So our heart is going to tell us things that aren't true. It is deceitful. And here, David is being deceived by his heart. He says, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. Well, faith would say, no, that's not true. God has anointed me to be the next king of Israel, and God wouldn't have done that if he wasn't going to see it through. But that faith is in a very weakened state, and so here he's basically giving up. He then comes up with a plan. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. Really? There's nothing better for you than to abandon your nation and abandon your homeland and abandon your God and go into the land of the enemy, the land who has fought your people, the land where there is idolatry rampant. There's nothing better for you than that. And that's what discouragement will do. Discouragement will tell us that there's nothing better for us than to go against what faith would lead us to do. And so he's going to escape into the land of the Philistines. And then it says, and Saul shall despair of me, to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. So he says, this is the way to get away from Saul. Saul's not going to chase me into the land of the Philistines. In fact, that is true. What Saul wouldn't do, discouragement was capable of doing. Isn't it interesting that this is a bad spot for David to be in the land of the Philistines, and Saul didn't drive him there? You know, they say this, we cannot no one can drive us up. Let me start all over. No one can destroy us, but they can lead us to self-destruction. And this chapter is a perfect visual of that. Nobody can destroy you. There's not a person out there that can destroy your life, but their pressure and their promptings can cause you to self-destruct and to do something that's going to hurt yourself. And that's what happens here. Saul couldn't have driven David into the land of the Philistines, but discouragement brought on by Saul has done that. And David arose, and he passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. Same city that Goliath was from. We see this irony again. We already read it a couple chapters ago, a few parts ago, but he's carrying the sword of Goliath into the city of Goliath. And he's approaching this heathen king, this pagan king. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, even David with his two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. So Saul gives up on him. He doesn't want to start anything with the Philistines. That would turn into an all-out war with them. And so he's leaving that alone. And as far as he's concerned, David's self-destructed here. So he's leaving it alone. Verse 5, And David said unto Achish, If I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? So this is a wise move on the part of David, considering where he is. He tells the king of Gath, Achish, hey, why don't you let me go out into the country? That way there's not going to be any conflict between you and I. It's not going to cause any talking amongst the people. They're not going to start, saying that I might try to uprise and conquer you. But notice what he says to him. He's looking for grace in his eyes, and he calls himself the servant of this pagan king. That's not the David that we know, but this is what discouragement has brought him to. Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. So Achish gives this section of town, this little town called Ziklag, to David and to his 600 men and their families. And it actually has abode to the Israelites until the time of this writing here. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. So 16 months David is in Ziklag, in the land of the Philistines. That's a long period of backsliding, and understand that's exactly what's happening here. David is in a backslidden state, and he's made some poor decisions. Someone made this statement years and years ago, and it's been so helpful to me through the years. Never make a decision when your decision maker is broken. You say, what does that mean? Well, when you're emotional, when you're frustrated, when you're discouraged, when you're depressed, don't make any decisions at that time, because usually your emotions are going to lead you to make a decision that you wouldn't make if things were better. So never make a decision when your decision maker is broken, and that's what's happening here. He spends 16 months in the land of the Philistines. And let's look at what he does while he's there. Well, I'll just tell you, he does what he's always done. He's a man of war. He's a bloody man. So David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Gezrites and the Amalekites. For those nations were of old, the inhabitants of the land, as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep and the oxen and the asses and the camels and the apparel, and returned and came to Achish. So David goes to fight all of these other pagan lands that are typically enemies of Israel. So he's probably pacifying his decision here. He's justifying his decision by saying, well, at least I can go to war with some of the enemies of Israel, and he makes himself feel a little bit better by doing that. And he goes in, and really there's no reason to fight them other than to go in and just steal their stuff. That's why he's doing it. He goes in, takes their money, their clothing, their livestock, their possessions and goods, brings it all in for himself. Well, then Achish asks what he's been up to, verse 10. Achish said, Whither have ye made a road today? Or, what progress have you been making down there? And David said, Against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites. Well, those are Israelite people down there. So David lies to Achish, and he doesn't tell him what he's actually been doing. He tells him that he's been attacking his own people. And this is going to make the Philistine king feel good about David, because if he's willing to turn on his own people, he's going to be loyal to Achish, the king of Gath and the Philistines. And David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring tidings to Gath, saying, Lest they should tell on us, saying, So did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines. Part of the reason David killed everyone in those cities was so that they wouldn't come back to Gath and tell Achish, David's down here just killing us all and stealing our stuff. And then Achish would find out about his lie. So he's lying to cover up his behavior. And so he kills everyone so that word does not get back to Achish. Verse 12, and Achish believed David, saying, He hath made his people Israel, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore, he shall be my servant forever. And based on what David told him, if David had attacked Judah, then the Israelites would turn on David forever, as Achish said, and then he's going to be indebted to Achish forever. And so, really bad time. I'm told, I don't know this for fact myself, but I've read and studied that no psalms were written during the time that he was in Ziklag. This period of time, 16 months, no psalms were written. You see, his heart has deceived him. He has lost his faith in God. He has run from the people of God into the land of idolatry. And these are all terrible decisions that he made. And we need to learn from these things. When you are in a tough spot and you're struggling, don't make any moves. Don't try to make any big decisions. Just stay put, stay where you are. And then your emotions will subside in time, and you can figure out what you ought to do after seeking God. Also, sometimes when we get discouraged, we pull away from the Lord, and we're not as close to Him as we ought to be. And we see all of that here in these 12 short verses of chapter 28. Bad time for the life of David. We always talk about the David and Bathsheba story, and certainly that was a horrible time for him as well. But this spot here, this is not good for David. All right, thanks so much for watching this morning. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.